For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The teaching is like a cool, refreshing stream, gently flowing into the soul, evoking endless contemplation about the value of life and the things we truly hold dear. Treasure here refers not only to money and material wealth, but also to fame, status, relationships, and even the passions and aspirations we pursue. Jesus wants to remind us that the heart, the place that holds love, care, and our deepest thoughts, will always be directed toward what we consider most precious. If our treasure consists of fleeting material values, our hearts will be forever entangled in anxiety and the fear of gain and loss. We will spend all our time and energy accumulating and cultivating these tangible things, only to realize at some point that we have forgotten the noble spiritual values. But if our treasure is love, sharing, knowledge, and compassion, then our souls will be filled with peace, serenity, and true joy. Our hearts will be open, ready to give and receive, because we know that the more these values are given away, the more they will multiply and flourish. The Lord's teaching is not a judgment, but a loving invitation. He invites each of us to pause for a moment in the midst of our hurried lives and ask ourselves what treasure we are truly seeking. Is it something that will bring us eternal happiness or just fleeting pleasures? Let our hearts be guided by noble values, by love and altruism. For when we place our treasure in the right place, we will find true peace and joy for our souls. As the French philosopher Albert Camus once reflected, "In the midst of winter, I found there was, within me, an invincible summer." That invincible summer is the precious spiritual treasure that no winter of life can bury. Before we begin, we kindly invite you to take a moment to subscribe to our channel to help spread this valuable content to your family and friends. We thank you, and now we invite you to listen. 1. The values you pursue are the compass of your soul. A compass always points north, and the human heart always points toward the treasure it deems most precious. What you desire, what you spend your time and mind thinking about every day, will determine the entire direction of your life, from your thoughts and words to your actions. It is the lighthouse that guides you, or the abyss that pulls you into its vortex. In a bustling market in Rome, Peter saw a merchant named Cassius engrossed in a map of trade routes to Egypt and Persia. Peter asked, "You seem to know every road." Cassius proudly replied, "Indeed, these roads are my silver and gold, my future." Jesus approached and said gently, "Cassius, you have a map of the world, but have you found the map for your own soul? The treasure you seek on distant voyages will determine the course of your soul's ship. Make sure it is heading toward a peaceful harbor. 2. What you possess on earth does not truly belong to you. Rather, it possesses you. The more material wealth a person holds, the more they are bound by it. The fear of loss, the burden of protection, and the stress of acquiring more turn people into slaves of their own possessions. Material treasure does not bring freedom. It builds invisible prisons. Jesus and the Apostle John walked past a magnificent villa. They saw Livia, a magistrate's wife, pacing in her garden with a worried expression. John asked her, "Madame, what troubles you in such a beautiful place?" Livia sighed. "I fear thieves will steal my new jewelry. I worry the mosaic on the wall will be damaged. I cannot sleep because of these things." Jesus looked at her with a compassionate gaze. "Madame, it is not you who possesses these things, but they that possess your peace. A true treasure will give you a good night's sleep, not take it away." 3. Store up for yourselves treasures that moths cannot destroy, and thieves cannot steal. Gold and silver can be stolen, beautiful clothes will be eaten by moths, and fame will fade with time. But compassion, wisdom, love, and forgiveness are eternal treasures. They will never lose their value and will follow you into eternity. A builder named Marius was boasting to a crowd about the durability of the marble he used to build temples for the Roman gods. "This work will last 1,000 years," Jesus said to his disciples nearby. "He builds a temple of stone, but you build a temple in your hearts with acts of love. Stone will turn to dust, but a small act of kindness will echo forever in the kingdom of heaven." 4. Don't tell me where your treasure is. Let your actions show me. Words can be empty. People can talk about noble things, but how they use their time, money, and talents is the truest evidence of where their hearts really are. Action is the language of the soul. In the temple courtyard, a rich man dropped a large bag of money into the offering box and said loudly, "I give this to God." Everyone was impressed. Then a poor widow with only 2 small coins also quietly put them in. Jesus called his disciples over and said, "That man gave from his surplus. His heart is still in his storeroom of wealth. But this widow has given all she had to live on. Her treasure is not money, but absolute faith. Her action is more valuable than all the others." 5. Your heart cannot both be set on the kingdom of heaven and immersed in worldly wealth. This is the philosophy of single-mindedness. A divided heart will never find peace. Trying to pursue both spiritual and material values equally will only lead to internal conflict and exhaustion. You must choose who the true master of your life is. Matthew, before following the Lord, introduced Jesus to a fellow tax collector named Septimus. Septimus said, "Teacher, I try to work righteously, collecting taxes for Caesar, but also making offerings to God. Can I serve both?" Jesus replied, "Septimus, can you walk on 2 roads at the same time? Sooner or later you will have to choose one path. Your heart is the same. It cannot love both the righteousness of God and the denarius of Caesar. Where your treasure is, there your heart will belong completely." 6. True treasure gives you freedom, not power. Worldly power comes from controlling others and property. But true freedom comes from not being controlled by anything. When your treasure is simplicity, gratitude, and love, you will no longer be shackled by ambition or fear. You are truly free. A Roman general, Lucius, returning from a victory, said to Jesus, "With this sword, I have power over thousands of men." Jesus looked into his eyes. "And does your heart have peace, Lucius? The sword gives you power over others, but it also chains you to the fear of rebellion and revenge. The treasure of the kingdom of heaven is not a sword to rule, but a key to free your own soul from those chains." 7. You find wealth not when you accumulate, but when you give away. The logic of the world is, the more you have, the richer you are. The logic of the kingdom of heaven is the opposite. The more you give, the richer you become. When you give a smile, a word of comfort, a helping hand, the treasure of compassion within you grows fuller. Material wealth diminishes when shared, but spiritual treasure multiplies. A young slave girl named Lyra shared half of her dry bread with an older beggar. Her master scolded her, "You fool! You don't even have enough for yourself." Jesus, passing by, saw this and said to his disciples, "Look, the girl's master has a whole storehouse of food, but his heart is starving. The girl has only half a piece of bread, but in sharing it, Her heart has become richer than all the storehouses in Rome. 8. The emptiness in the soul cannot be filled by things from the outside. People often try to fill the voids, the loneliness, and the insecurities in their hearts by shopping, partying, and seeking fame. But these are only temporary fixes. A leaky pot cannot be filled with water. Only treasure from God, from spiritual values, can mend and fill the soul. A young poet in Rome lamented to Jesus, "Teacher, I have written verses praised by everyone, attended the most lavish parties, yet my heart is still empty." Jesus placed a hand on his shoulder. You are trying to quench your thirst with seawater. You are trying to fill your soul with the world's applause. The treasure you need to find is not in the clapping of the crowd, but in the silence where you meet yourself and meet God. 9. Your true legacy is what you sow in the hearts of others. When you die, you can't take any possessions with you. The legacy a person leaves behind is not their buildings, statues, or wealth, but the mark they leave on the hearts and lives of those who remain. A lesson taught, a helping hand, a memory of love. That is the immortal treasure. An old councilman, worried his name would be forgotten, spent a great deal of money to have a statue of himself placed in the public square. He asked Jesus, "Will this statue help people remember me?" Jesus pointed to a teacher patiently teaching a few poor children to read and said, "Sir, stone can be worn away, but the seeds of knowledge and character that this teacher sows in the hearts of these children will grow and continue to bear fruit for generations. Your treasure is a cold statue. His treasure is living souls." 10. Your heart is always seeking a home. Make sure you are building your house in the right place. Deep down, every soul longs for a home, a place of security, love, and belonging. Many mistakenly believe that this home is built with bricks and mortar, with wealth and luxury. But the true home of the soul is built on the foundation of faith, hope, and love. It is the place where your heart finds ultimate peace, and that is the kingdom of heaven. Standing on a hill overlooking the majestic city of Rome, a disciple exclaimed, "What a great city! So many people call this place home." Jesus looked into the distance and said, "They build their houses on the earth, but storms and time will shake them. You build your house in the heart of the Father in heaven. For when you place your treasure with the Father, your heart will find its way home, a home that nothing can destroy." 11. Your treasure determines the lens through which you see life. If your treasure is gold, you will see everyone and everything through the lens of profit and loss. If your treasure is power, you will see the world through the lens of dominance and submission. But if your treasure is love, you will see all things, even your enemies, through the lens of compassion and empathy. In a mosaic workshop, the artisan Decimus was angrily discarding grey pebbles. "Useless things," he muttered. "I only need the colored glass from Phoenicia." Jesus approached, picked up a grey pebble and said, "Decimus, with the eyes of one seeking expensive things, you see only a worthless stone. But with the eyes of one seeking beauty, you would see in it the entire Sul before a storm. The treasure you seek not only determines what you possess, but also the very world you see." 12. Gratitude is a sign that your treasure is in the right place. A person whose treasure is wealth will never have enough. Their heart is always restless with desire. A person whose treasure is the kingdom of heaven will always have enough. Their heart is filled with gratitude for the smallest things. Gratitude is the fragrance that emanates from a soul that has found its true treasure. A wealthy grape merchant named Cornelius complained to Jesus, "This year's harvest is good, but not as good as last year's, and the taxes are high." At the same moment, a laborer walked by, took a drink from a public fountain, and looked up to the sky with a smile. Jesus pointed to the laborer and said to Cornelius, "You have a whole vineyard, yet your heart is barren because of what you do not have. That man has nothing but a cool drink of water, yet his heart is fertile with gratitude. Which of the two is truly richer?" 13. Don't let the treasures of the past blind you to the treasures of the present. Many people are imprisoned by the treasures of the past, be they resounding successes or painful failures. They cling to them, leaving no room in their hearts for the gifts that the present offers. True treasure must be lived and experienced in every moment. An old veteran sat in the park, constantly recounting the heroic battles of his youth. He paid no attention to the laughter of his grandson playing beside him. Jesus sat down with him and the Apostle Andrew. He said, "Friend, the medals in your chest are the treasure of yesterday, but this child's laughter is the treasure of today. Do not let your heart dwell so much in the past that you miss the life budding right before your eyes." 14. Comparison is the thief of the treasure of peace. When you start comparing your treasure with others, whether it's houses, talents, or children, you allow insecurity and envy to sneak in and steal the peace from your soul. Each person's treasure is unique, just as each person's journey is unique. Two women were neighbors. One was married to a potter, the other to a weaver. The potter's wife said to Jesus, "I feel envious. My neighbor's cloth sells for a better price than my husband's pottery." Jesus replied, "A clay pot has the value of a clay pot to hold water and keep it cool. A piece of cloth has the value of a piece of cloth to cover the body and keep it warm. If a rose kept looking at an oak tree and wishing to be as tall as it would never bloom brilliantly. Cherish your own treasure. Do not let it wither in comparison." 15. You cannot take worldly treasures through the door of death, but you can send them ahead. All material wealth must be left behind. But every act of love, every helping hand you extend, every soul you touch with compassion, it is as if you are sending your treasure ahead into the kingdom of heaven. It will be waiting for you there. A Roman nobleman was on his deathbed. He grasped the Apostle Thomas's hand and whispered, "I have a great fortune, but now it is useless." Jesus stood at the foot of the bed and said gently, "That is true. You cannot take your gold and silver with you. But last week, you used your money to buy freedom for a slave. That freedom has gone before you into the kingdom of heaven. That slave's gratitude is waiting for you. That is the treasure you can truly take with you." 16. Anxiety is the shadow of worldly treasure. The greater your treasure, the longer the shadow of anxiety. You worry about it being lost, damaged, or stolen. But spiritual treasures like faith and hope have no shadow. They are light in themselves, dispelling all anxiety and fear. At the port of Ostia, a ship owner named Titus stood restlessly, looking out at the sea. "A storm is coming," he said to Jesus. "All my cargo is on that ship." Jesus pointed to the seagulls, flying calmly over the waves, and said, "Titus, those birds have no cargo, so they have no anxiety. They trust in the wings the Father has given them. Your treasure is out on the open sea, so your heart is also in the midst of the storm." 17. True treasure does not make you arrogant. It makes you humble. Worldly wealth and fame often fan the flames of arrogance. People become proud of what they have. But when a person realizes that the true treasure is the grace and love of God, a gift they do not supposum deserve, they become exceedingly humble. A learned scholar, after winning debates against many other philosophers in Rome, boasted to the Apostle Paul, who was then still Saul, "Knowledge is my treasure, and it makes me superior to others." Jesus, passing by, heard this and said, "You know the names of all the stars, but do you know how to heal a broken heart? The treasure of knowledge puffs you up, but the treasure of true wisdom will make you bow down to serve." 18. Your heart is a piece of land. The treasure you sow will determine the harvest you reap. Every day, you are sowing seeds into the soil of your soul. If you sow seeds of greed and envy, you will reap a harvest full of thorns and sorrow. If you sow seeds of patience, kindness, and forgiveness, you will harvest the fruits of joy and peace. A farmer complained to Jesus, "Teacher, my land is full of weeds, preventing the wheat from growing." Jesus asked him, "When you were not sowing wheat, did you notice what you were sowing?" The farmer was silent. Jesus continued, "Your heart is the same. If you do not intentionally sow good thoughts in it, the seeds of worldly anxiety and desire will grow on their own and choke out life." 19. Treasure is not the destination, but the path you walk. Many people think that happiness is when they achieve a certain treasure, getting a house, a dream job. But Jesus taught that happiness lies on the very path of pursuing the true treasure. To live each day with love, forgiveness, and compassion, that is to live in the treasure itself. A young soldier named Marcus said to Jesus, "When I am discharged and have enough money to buy a small farm, then I will be happy." Jesus replied, "Marcus, why wait until then? You can find treasure today. By sharing your rations with a comrade, by treating the local people fairly, by praying for your enemies. Happiness is not the farm at the end of the road, but how you walk on that road." 20. Forgiveness is choosing to store peace instead of resentment. Holding on to resentment is like holding a hot coal in your heart, hoping it will burn someone else. But the first and most hurt person is you. Forgiveness is the act of cleaning out the treasury of the soul, throwing away toxic things to make room for peace. A woman who had been slandered by her neighbor came to Jesus and the Apostle John, her heart full of bitterness. "I will never forget what she did." Jesus asked, "If someone gave you a bag of garbage, how long would you keep it in your house?" The woman replied, "I would throw it out immediately." Jesus said gently, "Then why do you keep those toxic slanders in your heart day after day? Throw them away. The treasure you should keep is serenity, not resentment." Before we continue with today's journey of discovery, we would greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to leave a comment and share your feelings. If you found this content valuable, please don't forget to hit the share button to spread these positive vibes to your friends and family. And now, let's get back to the program. 21. True joy is the fruit of spiritual treasure, while pleasure is merely the weed of worldly treasure. The world often confuses pleasure with joy. Pleasure is the temporary stimulation that comes from material things, fame, or the flesh. It comes quickly and goes quickly, leaving behind a sense of emptiness. True joy is a deep state of the soul that arises from living in harmony with eternal values. It endures even in adversity. A group of young Roman nobles emerged from a lavish party, their faces weary. One of them said to Jesus, We had everything last night, fine wine, exotic food, but this morning my heart feels dull." Jesus pointed to a carpenter, whistling cheerfully as he worked, and said, "Your treasure was a night's party, so your joy was as short-lived as the party. His treasure is work done with all his heart, so his joy is renewed every day." 22. Do not work just to fill your barns, work to fill your soul. Work can be a curse, a burden just to make a living, but it can also be a blessing, a means to express the talents God has given you, to serve the community, and to find meaning. It depends on whether you see work as a means to achieve material treasure, or whether the useful work itself is a treasure. A blacksmith named Vulcanus was forging a sword for a Roman soldier. He worked with a scowl, just wanting to get his payment quickly. Jesus and Peter approached. The Lord asked, "Friend, do you put the same heart into forging a plowshare for a farmer?" The blacksmith replied, "A plowshare pays less." The Lord said, "When you forge a sword, you only receive a few coins, but when you forge a plowshare with all your love, you receive not only payment, but also the joy of having contributed to making bread." Choose the treasure that will feed both your body and your soul. 23. The eye is the window of the soul. What you choose to look at will fill the treasury within. This is the philosophy of selective reception. If you constantly look at luxury, lewdness, and violence, your soul will be filled with similar desires and fears. If you intentionally seek and behold what is good, true, and holy, the treasury of your soul will be filled with light. Jesus saw a group of children gathered around a dead dog by the roadside with disgust and mockery. Everyone was talking about the stench. Jesus approached, looked, and said, "Look at its teeth, as white as pearls." Amidst the ugliness, he chose to see a small touch of beauty. He turned to his disciples. "Your heart will become what your eyes seek. Practice looking for the good, even in the midst of the worst." 24. Silence can be the most precious treasure in a noisy world. The world is always full of noise, the noise of ambition, of public opinion, of ceaseless demands. In that noise, you cannot hear the voice of God or the whisper of your own soul. Seeking moments of silence is to seek a treasure, a place where you can find clarity and peace again. In the Roman Forum, politicians were giving loud speeches and vendors were shouting. Everyone was swept away. Jesus led his disciples into the quiet inner courtyard of a house. Matthew asked, "Why did we leave when there were so many people to teach there?" Jesus replied, "One cannot fill a cup while it is being shaken violently. The soul is the same. You must first find the treasure of silence for yourselves, and then from that silence, your words will have weight." 25. Love is not a treasure to be possessed, but a current to merge with. Many people view love for a spouse, children, friends, as a possession. They want to control, to own, and they become jealous. But true love is not a stagnant pond, it is a river. The more you try to stop it for yourself, the more stagnant it becomes. Let it flow through you to others, and you will always be in its fresh current. A young husband complained to Jesus, "My wife loves even our poor neighbors. She gives them her time and attention. I want her to give all of that to me." Jesus pointed to an irrigation channel, watering several gardens, and said, "If you dam up all the water for your own garden, it will soon turn into a swamp. But when you let the water flow freely, it not only refreshes your garden, but also brings life to many other gardens and keeps itself fresh. Love is the same. 26. Your treasure determines your greatest fear. Tell me what you fear most, and I will tell you what your treasure is. If you fear poverty, your treasure is money. If you fear criticism, your treasure is reputation. If you fear loneliness, your treasure is relationships. But if you fear being distant from God, then your treasure is in the right place. In a conversation, Jesus asked a group of people, "What is your greatest fear?" A merchant said, "Going bankrupt." A soldier said, "Losing a battle." A mother said, "Losing my child." Jesus listened, then said, "All those fears grow from the treasures you love on this earth. When your greatest treasure is the kingdom of heaven, your greatest fear will only be to displease the Father in heaven. And that fear will set you free from all other fears. 27. Simplicity is not poverty, but freedom from the burden of treasure. The world sees simplicity as lack. But in reality, simplicity is a wise choice to free the mind and heart from the complexity and anxiety that come from accumulating wealth. Living simply is a way to have more space for the real treasures, relationships, experiences, and spirituality. A Roman magistrate visited the place where Jesus and his disciples were staying. He was surprised by its simplicity and asked, "Why don't you find a place to live that is worthy of your influence?" Jesus smiled and replied, "A bird does not need a golden cage to sing beautifully. The burden of wealth is like a cage. It limits the freedom of the soul. Our treasure is not what we have, but what we do not need to have." 28. A nation that sees power as its treasure will build colosseums. A nation that sees compassion as its treasure will build hospitals. This principle applies not only to individuals, but also to a collective, a society. The public works, the laws, the priorities of a nation all show where that nation's heart is. Does it glorify strength or healing? Does it invest in war or in people? Passing by the massive construction of the Colosseum, Peter marveled at its greatness. "The power of Rome is astonishing." Jesus looked at the structure with sad eyes. They use their strength to build a place where blood will be shed for entertainment. That is their treasure. But the kingdom of heaven we are building is founded on mercy. Instead of a Colosseum, the Father in heaven wants us to build a place where the sick are cared for, the hungry are fed. That is the treasure that shows true greatness. 29. Judging others is an attempt to increase the value of your own treasure by devaluing theirs. When you judge or criticize the lifestyle, choices, or mistakes of others, it is often because you feel insecure about your own treasure. By pointing out their poverty, you hope to highlight your own wealth. A soul that is truly content with its treasure has no need to judge, only a need to understand and love. A Pharisee stood praying, loudly recounting his own righteousness and despising the tax collector who was praying at a distance. Jesus told this story to the crowd and concluded, the Pharisee tried to make his treasure of righteousness seem larger by comparing it with others. But God does not look at that comparison. He looks at the heart. The tax collector, with his humble and broken heart, went home richer in grace. Do not enrich yourself by declaring others bankrupt. 30. The ultimate treasure is not a thing, but a relationship. After all, Jesus wants to guide us to the deepest truth, the most precious, eternal treasure that brings complete peace and joy is not an idea, a virtue, or an achievement, but an intimate, living, and loving relationship with God the Father himself. When your heart is in that relationship, you have everything. One evening, after a long day of teaching, the Apostle John asked Jesus, "Teacher, in the end, what is the greatest treasure? Wisdom, love, or peace?" Jesus looked up at the starry sky and said, "John, would you ask a child if his treasure is the roof over his head, the food, or his clothes? No. His treasure is the embrace of his father and mother. From that embrace he has all those other things. Our ultimate treasure is the same. It is not the gifts, but the giver of the gifts. Place your heart with the Father, and you will never be in want." 31. Your treasure determines what you consider normal. For someone whose treasure is power, scheming and maneuvering are normal. For someone whose treasure is luxury, extravagant spending is normal. When you choose the treasure of the kingdom of heaven, then forgiveness, generosity, and humility, which the world considers abnormal, become your new normal. A tax collector named Zenos, an old friend of Matthew, boasted that he had just bent the law to make a large profit. "It's normal in this business," Zenos said. Jesus, hearing this, told a short parable. There was a shepherd who noticed one of his sheep was lost. He left the other 99 to find the one lost sheep. The world would say he is abnormal for sacrificing the many for the few. But for the Father in heaven, that boundless love is the most normal thing. Be careful, Zenos, of your normal. 32. Worldly treasures make you build walls. Heavenly treasures make you build bridges. Those who accumulate material wealth often build high walls to protect their assets, creating separation from others. They live in fear and isolation. Those who accumulate love and compassion are always seeking to build bridges of understanding and connection, bridging differences and healing divisions. Jesus and the Apostle James passed by two adjacent houses. One, belonging to a rich man, was surrounded by a high stone wall. The other, a common family's home, had a bench placed by the door. Jesus pointed to the wall and said, "This wall was built out of fear to protect the treasure inside. It keeps thieves out, but it also imprisons the owner within." Then he pointed to the bench. That bench was placed there out of openness, inviting passers-by to rest. It is a small bridge. Your treasure will determine whether you are a wall builder or a bridge builder. 33. A clear conscience is the softest pillow a person can own. You can have a bed of ivory and a mattress of goose feathers, but if your treasure was obtained through dishonesty, your conscience will not let you sleep. Conversely, a person who is poor but lives uprightly can sleep soundly on a hard floor. Inner peace is a treasure that brings true rest. A Roman official named Sextus, who had grown rich by taking bribes, complained to Jesus about his insomnia. "I have the finest pillows from Germania," he said, "but I have nightmares every night." Jesus looked him straight in the eye. "Sextus, you seek rest on pillows made of feathers, but you ignore the pillow made of integrity. The burden on your shoulders comes not from your work, but from the unclean money in your purse. A clear conscience is a treasure that provides sleep no pillow can buy." 34. True treasure is not afraid of being questioned. False treasures like hollow fame, power based on oppression, or ill-gotten wealth. They are terrified of being questioned and exposed. They need silence and obedience to exist. But the treasures of truth, love, and justice always welcome the light of inquiry. The more they are questioned, the more their value shines. A Stoic philosopher challenged Jesus before a crowd. "If your teaching is the truth, prove it." A few disciples became annoyed, but Jesus smiled and began an open dialogue with him. Later, he said privately to his disciples, "Never be afraid of questions. A seller of fake gold will get angry when a customer wants to test it with fire, but a seller of real gold rejoices. If your treasure is truth, then every question is an opportunity for it to prove its worth." 35. Your scars can become treasures when you allow the Father's light to shine through them. Everyone has wounds, scars from the past. The world teaches us to hide them because they are signs of weakness. But in the kingdom of heaven, when you offer those scars to God, He can turn them into a source of empathy, strength, and healing for others. Your scars become a testament to His healing power. A woman, filled with shame for her past sins, always wore a cloak that covered her face. She told Jesus, "I am not worthy." Jesus replied, "Which clay pot is more valuable? A perfect pot that has never been used, or a pot that was once broken, mended with gold, and now is used to carry water for the thirsty? Do not hide your cracks. Let the Father's love mend them, and it is through those very cracks that your light will shine for those who are lost in darkness." 36. Hospitality is the act of sharing the treasure of your home to enrich the treasure of your soul. When you open your door to a stranger, a traveler, a poor person, you are not just giving them shelter and food. You are declaring that your treasure is not privacy or comfort, but connection and humanity. Every guest welcomed is an opportunity to enrich the treasure of compassion. Martha was busy preparing a lavish meal for Jesus, while her sister Mary sat at his feet listening. Martha complained. Jesus said, "Martha, you are worried about many things, but only one is needed. Mary has chosen the better treasure, which is the word of life. But both of you can practice hospitality. You prepare a meal for the body, while Mary prepares a space for the soul. True hospitality is knowing how to give both." 37. How you use your treasure of time shows who you are serving. Everyone has the same treasure of time each day. What do you use it for? To accumulate more wealth? To seek fame? Or to pray? To be with loved ones? To serve others? Your daily schedule is the financial statement of your soul, showing where you are investing. A busy merchant told Jesus, "I have no time to go to the synagogue. I have to manage my business." Jesus asked, "If Caesar summoned you, would you go?" The merchant replied, "Of course." Jesus said, "You see, you have time for the one you consider your master. The issue is not a lack of time, but to whom you have dedicated your treasure of time, to Caesar or to God." 38. Taking on the burdens of others is how you turn the stones of this world into the gold of the kingdom of heaven. The world's logic is to avoid burdens. The kingdom's logic is to seek opportunities to share burdens. When you listen to a friend's pain, help a neighbor in trouble, or stand up for the weak, you are performing a sacred alchemy, turning worldly burdens into eternal treasure. On the road, Jesus and his disciples saw Simon of Cyrene being forced by Roman soldiers to help carry the cross for a condemned prisoner. The disciples looked fearful and distant. After it was over, Simon sat down, exhausted. Jesus went to him and said, "Today you carried a piece of wood, but in my Father's eyes you carried the pain of a human being. You thought you lost strength and time, but you have just accumulated a treasure that no one can take away." 39. The greatest treasures are often hidden in the most ordinary tasks. People tend to look for great things, extraordinary miracles, grand missions. But often, God places the most precious treasures, like patience, faithfulness, love, in the repetitive tasks of daily life, preparing a meal, cleaning the house, doing one's job with dedication. The Apostle Peter, after a long, tiring day, said, "Teacher, sometimes I miss the days when I was just an ordinary fisherman." Jesus replied, "Peter, do you think casting a net requires less faith than preaching? To cast the net every day, even when you catch nothing, requires patience. To mend torn nets requires diligence. To share the catch with others requires generosity. Do not despise ordinary work. The kingdom of heaven is built with such bricks." 40. The curiosity of a child is the treasure that leads to the kingdom of heaven. Adults often think they know everything. They close the door to wonder and learning. But a child is always curious, always asking why. It is that very attitude, the humility to admit you don't know, and the desire to discover, that is the key to unlocking the mysteries of faith. While scholars were debating complex laws with Jesus, a little girl ran up and asked him, "Why is the grass green?" The scholars laughed at her innocence, but Jesus lifted the child up and said to them, "You debate what is written in books, but you have forgotten how to ask questions about what my Father has written all over the world. Unless you become like this child and find again the treasure of curiosity and wonder, you will not be able to enter the kingdom of heaven." Before we continue with today's journey of discovery, we would greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to leave a comment and share your feelings. If you found this content valuable, please don't forget to hit the share button to spread these positive vibes to your friends and family. And now, let's get back to the program. 41. When you face suffering, your treasure will be tested by fire. Suffering is the soul's refinery. Wood, hay, and straw will be burned up. Gold, silver, and precious stones will become more pure. If your treasure is temporary, things like health, comfort, or praise, suffering will burn them up and leave ashes. If your treasure is faith, hope, and love, suffering will only make them shine more brilliantly. Job, once a rich man who had lost everything, sat in ashes. A friend came and said, "You must have committed some sin." Jesus, when retelling this story, said to his disciples, Job's friend thought treasure was prosperity and disaster was punishment. But Job, despite losing everything, clung to his final treasure, his faith in the righteousness of God. The fire of adversity burned his possessions, but it refined the treasure of his faith. 42. Patience is the art of guarding a treasure that has not yet borne fruit. The world wants everything instantly, but the most precious things often need time to grow. A tree, a friendship, wisdom, and the kingdom of heaven in the soul. Patience is not doing nothing. It is an act of faith, the act of watering and caring for the seed of treasure that you cannot yet see. A young farmer had just sown his seeds. Every day, he would go out and dig up the soil to see if the seeds had sprouted. Jesus saw this and said, "You are harming your own crop. Your treasure is under the ground, and it needs time, darkness, and trust. Your heart is the same. When you sow a good deed, do not expect it to bear fruit immediately. Patiently guard it with faith, and the Father in heaven will make it grow at the right time." 43. The treasure of tomorrow is often the enemy of the joy of today. Give us this day our daily bread. This prayer teaches a profound philosophy. God provides for us one day at a time. When you worry too much about tomorrow's treasure, you will miss the gifts and blessings that God gives you right here today. On their journey, the disciples were worried because they only had enough bread for one day. Andrew said, "What will we eat tomorrow?" Jesus broke a piece of bread, gave it to a child by the roadside, and said, "My Father's treasure is not in a storehouse, but in his generosity. Seek the kingdom of heaven today and feast on the joy of today. Do not let the worry of tomorrow's hunger take away the taste of the bread in the present." 44. The Sabbath is a forgotten treasure. In a world obsessed with productivity and achievement, rest is seen as laziness. But God established rest as a treasure. It is a time for the soul to recover, to reconnect with the Creator and with loved ones, to remember that your value is not in what you produce, but in who you are. Jesus and his disciples were walking through a wheat field on the Sabbath, and they began to pick some heads of grain to eat. The Pharisees criticized them. Jesus replied, "The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. You have turned a treasure of freedom and healing into a burden of rules. You guard the shell, but have lost the kernel. True rest is a gift, not a prison." 45. The greatest treasure of a teacher is not knowledge, but the growth of the student. A bad teacher sees knowledge as a treasure to keep for themselves, creating dependency. A good teacher sees knowledge as seeds to distribute, but a great teacher sees the development, independence, and ability of the student to surpass even them as the most precious treasure. Nicodemus, a Jewish leader, came to Jesus at night. He said, "Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher who has come from God." Jesus did not just give him answers. He challenged him to be born again, to begin a new journey of discovery on his own. He did not hand him a ready-made treasure of knowledge. He gave him a map and encouraged him to find the way himself. Because the real treasure is not the destination, but the transformation on the journey. 46. You find true strength when you dare to acknowledge the treasure of weakness. The Roman world worshipped strength, perfection, and self-reliance. But the kingdom of heaven operates on a reverse logic. When you dare to admit your weakness, your shortcomings, and your need for God and others, you are opening a space for God's power to work. That humility is a treasure in itself. Paul, by then a follower of Christ, in a moment of discouragement, prayed, "Take away this thorn in my flesh." The Lord, in a vision, answered him, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Paul later understood and preached, "Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, for when I am weak, then I am strong." He had discovered the treasure hidden in his imperfection. 47. You can only save your life when you dare to give it away. This is the greatest paradox. Whoever tries to protect their life at all costs, accumulating treasures to ensure their safety, will ultimately lose the meaning of life. Whoever dares to give up their own safety, to give away their time, talents, and even their life for a higher purpose, will find true, eternal life. A rich young man asked Jesus how to gain eternal life. Jesus told him to sell all his possessions and follow him. The man went away sad, because his treasure was too great. Jesus turned to his disciples and said, he wanted to have eternal life as an added treasure to what he already had. But he didn't understand that to get that treasure, he had to sell all his other treasures. He tried to keep his life, and in doing so, he lost it. 48. Hope is not the treasure of optimism, but the treasure of trust even in the darkness. Optimism is believing that everything will turn out okay. Hope is believing that God is still there and loves you, even when things don't seem okay. Optimism depends on external circumstances. Hope is an anchor for the soul, an inner treasure that helps you stand firm in any storm. Before his arrest, in the Garden of Gethsemane, the disciples fell into sleep and fear. Jesus, however, prayed. He was not optimistic, because he knew what was about to happen. But he was full of hope in the Father's plan. He said to the panicked Peter, "Satan has asked to sift all of you as wheat. But I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail." The treasure he gave Peter at that moment was not an assurance of safety, but the hope to get up after falling. 49. The greatest treasure of a creature is to be known by name by the Creator. In the vast Roman Empire, an individual was just a number, an anonymous citizen. People longed to be known, to be recognized. But the world's recognition is only temporary. The most priceless and certain treasure is knowing that the one who made the universe knows who you are, loves you unconditionally, and calls you by name affectionately. The disciples returned from a mission trip, joyfully reporting, "Lord, even the demons submit to us in your name." Jesus shared in their joy, but then he said, however, "Do not rejoice that the spirits submit to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven." He reminded them that the greatest treasure was not the power they demonstrated, but their place in God's heart. 50. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Therefore, place your heart in my hands. In the end, all philosophies come down to one final invitation, one act of faith. Jesus not only shows us where the true treasure is, but he also offers to be the guardian of that treasure. Placing your heart, with all its hopes, fears, dreams, and wounds, into his loving and powerful hands is the only way to ensure that our treasure is eternally secure. At the Last Supper, Jesus took the bread, broke it, and gave it to his disciples. He said, "This is my body." Then he took the cup of wine. "This is my blood." This was not just a ritual. It was the ultimate declaration. He did not just talk about treasure. He made himself the treasure. He said to them, "The world will give you gold, power, fame, but I give you myself. Let your hearts find rest in me, and you will find rest, life, and peace. For where I am, that is your home." 51. Your treasure determines how you treat the land beneath your feet. If your treasure is immediate profit, you will exploit the land, rivers, and animals cruelly to enrich yourself. You see nature as a resource to be owned. But if your treasure is the wisdom of the Creator, you will see all living things as your brothers and sisters. You will care for and preserve them as a faithful steward, knowing you are part of a greater creation. A Roman landowner named Falco boasted to Jesus about how he had cleared an ancient forest to plant more grapes. "Next year, my wine production will double," he said proudly. Jesus picked up an acorn from the ground and said, "Falco, you have traded a treasure that takes hundreds of years to grow for a treasure that lasts only one season. You hear the sound of coins, but you did not hear the sigh of the forest. A wise steward does not eat the sheep that will provide wool for him next year." 52. Creativity is humanity's response to the treasure of beauty that the Father has bestowed. God did not create a world that is merely functional. He created a world full of beauty. When people, be they potters, weavers, musicians, or cooks, use their talents to create something beautiful, they are not just working. They are participating in the creative act of God, turning raw materials into sources of joy and inspiration. That treasure lies in the very act of creation. A potter named Eliana was carefully painting intricate patterns on a simple clay pot. Her neighbor said, "Why bother? It's still just a pot." Jesus, passing by, picked up the pot and said to the neighbor, "You see clay, but Eliana sees an opportunity. My father painted the sunset and colored the flowers, not because it was necessary, but because he loves beauty. When Eliana uses her hands to create beauty, she is saying amen to his work. Her treasure is not just the pot, but the joy of co-creating with God." 53. Your words are either treasure or weapons, depending on the heart that stores them. From the same treasury of language, you can bring out words that build, heal, and comfort, or words that criticize, spread rumors, and hurt. The tongue has no bones, but it can create wounds deeper than any sword. Be careful with the treasure in your mouth, for it accurately reflects the treasure in your heart. At a village well, a few people were gossiping about a woman in the village who had made a mistake. Their words were as sharp as knives. Jesus came to draw water and said to them, "Each of you has a pouch with you. One pouch contains stones, the other contains seeds. When you talk about others, which pouch are you choosing from? Will your words sow seeds of healing or throw stones that make others stumble?" 54. To be a peacemaker is not to avoid conflict, but to bring the treasure of healing into the midst of conflict. Many people think peace is the absence of quarrels, but that is just a ceasefire. True peace, shalom, is harmony, justice, and wholeness. A peacemaker is not afraid to confront uncomfortable truths. They bring the treasure of empathy and wisdom between two parties, helping them find a common path. Two brothers were arguing fiercely over their inheritance. The Apostle Thaddeus wanted to walk away to avoid trouble, but Jesus stepped in between them. He did not divide the inheritance for them. He listened to each one, then asked them about the childhood memories they had together. He said, "You are fighting over the treasure of land and money, and it is tearing you apart. Your real treasure is your brotherhood. Find that first, and then dividing the rest will become easy." 55. How you treat a stranger shows whether you truly believe in a common Father. It is easy to love family and friends, but the stranger, the foreigner, the person of a different faith, they are the true test of your treasure. If you believe that everyone is created in the image of God, then no one is a stranger anymore, only brothers and sisters you have not yet met. A Samaritan merchant fell ill in a Jewish town. The villagers shunned him. A Jewish woman, despite the disapproval, brought him water and porridge. Jesus said to her critics, "You guard the treasure of your laws meticulously, but you have lost the treasure of compassion. You see a Samaritan. She sees a person in need. Who among you truly understands the will of my Father, who makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good?" 56. A soft heart is fertile ground for the treasures of the kingdom of heaven. Life can harden the heart through disappointment, betrayal, or suffering. A hardened heart cannot receive the seeds of joy, forgiveness, or new love. Keeping your heart soft, vulnerable, and open, despite the risks, is the prerequisite for heavenly treasures to take root and grow. An old Roman soldier who had seen too many battles said to Jesus, "My heart has turned to stone. I no longer feel anything." Jesus replied, "A barren land cannot grow fruit. Do not be afraid of the tears of repentance or the rains of compassion. They may hurt old wounds, but they also soften the hardened ground within you, so that life can begin again. The treasure of new life requires soft soil." 57. Your imagination is a workshop. It can forge treasures of hope or idols of fear. God gave humans the ability to imagine. You can use it to envision a better future, to empathize with the pain of others, to dream of the kingdom of heaven. That is using imagination to create hope. But you can also use it to paint the worst-case scenarios, to nurture baseless anxieties, to erect idols of failure. The treasure you seek will direct your imagination. When the disciples were in the boat during a storm, their imagination painted scenes of the boat sinking and death. They saw Jesus walking on the water and thought he was a ghost. Their imagination, guided by fear, could not recognize their salvation. Jesus said, "You of little faith, why are you so afraid?" You have let the treasure of fear control your imagination. Let faith be the master, and you will imagine yourselves walking on water. 58. A treasure, no matter how good, can become an idol when it takes the place of God. This is one of the most subtle truths. Even good treasures like family, meaningful work, service, or knowledge can become dangerous. Whenever a treasure, however noble, becomes your ultimate source of security, meaning, and identity instead of God, it has become an idol. A young rabbi was very devout and knowledgeable in the law. He spent all his time studying and serving in the synagogue. He told Jesus, "My treasure is the law of the Lord." Jesus replied, "The law is like a finger pointing to the moon. The treasure is the moon, not the finger. You love the finger so much that you no longer look at the moon. Do not let the very gift of God prevent you from coming to God himself." 59. A person's treasure is measured by the strength of their why. What motivates you to get up in the morning? What helps you stand firm in difficult times? A person's strength lies not in their wealth or status, but in their reason for living. A person with a big enough why for family, for justice, for the love of God, can endure almost any how. Your why is your core treasure. A slave named Davos, despite being treated cruelly, maintained his dignity and kindness. His master, a rich but always bored man, asked Jesus, "Why does he, who has nothing, seem more at peace than I do?" Jesus replied, "Because your why is to get one more coin. Davis's why is to live worthy of the image of a loving God he believes in. His treasure cannot be taken away by chains or whips." 60. Integrity is the treasure of an unfragmented life. Integrity means wholeness. It is when your words, thoughts, and actions are one. A person who lacks integrity has many faces. One for church, one for work, one for family. They are fragmented. A person with integrity has only one self, no matter where they are or who they are with. This consistency is a treasure that brings great peace and strength. The temple guards came to arrest Jesus, but returned empty-handed. The chief priests asked, "Why didn't you arrest him?" They replied, "No one ever spoke the way this man does." What impressed them was not just his words, but the absolute unity between what he said and who he was. He was not playing a role. He was himself. His treasure was truth, and he lived that truth with complete integrity. Before we continue with today's journey of discovery, we would greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to leave a comment and share your feelings. If you found this content valuable, please don't forget to hit the share button to spread these positive vibes to your friends and family. And now, let's get back to the program. 61. Truly listening is offering the treasure of your attention to others. In most conversations, people don't really listen. They are just waiting for their turn to speak. Truly listening is an act of sacrifice. You temporarily set aside your own thoughts, opinions, and needs to enter the world of the other person. It is a precious gift, a treasure of presence, often more healing than any advice. After healing the leper, Jesus took the time to sit with him. The disciples wondered why he didn't go to the waiting crowd. Jesus answered, "For years no one dared to come near him. What he needs now, no less than new skin, is a willing ear to listen to his story." 62. Your joy becomes a complete treasure when you can rejoice in the treasure of others. Envy is the feeling of pain at someone else's success. Shared joy, mudita, is the feeling of happiness at someone else's success. The world teaches us to compete, to see others' success as a threat. The kingdom of heaven teaches that joy is multiplied when it is shared and celebrated together. The ability to rejoice for others is a sign of a rich heart. John the Baptist saw his own disciples begin to follow Jesus. Some of his followers felt jealous, but John said, "He must become greater. I must become less. My joy is now complete." John the Baptist showed that his treasure was not his own fame, but the success of the greater mission. 63. Faithfulness in small things builds a treasure of trustworthiness. Everyone wants to show loyalty in big moments, in dramatic events. But true trust is built from hundreds of small, unseen actions. A promise kept, a secret respected, a job done carefully. The treasure of trustworthiness is the most valuable asset in any relationship. Jesus told the parable of the servants entrusted with talents. The ones given 5 and 2 talents made a profit. The master did not say, "Well done, talented servant," but "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things." He taught that the treasure of great responsibilities is only given to those who have proven their faithfulness in small things. 64. Seeing the image of the Father in the person you hate most is finding treasure in the most unexpected place. Love your enemies is the most difficult teaching. It becomes possible when you practice looking beyond their wrong actions and hurtful words to recognize that deep inside them is also a creature loved by God, bearing a divine image, however tarnished. Finding that image of the Father is finding a treasure that allows you to forgive. While being crucified, amidst the soldiers who were mocking him and dividing his clothes, Jesus prayed, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." In that moment of ultimate pain, he did not see enemies. He saw the lost children of his Father, those who had lost the treasure of recognition. 65. Surrender is not abandoning your treasure, but entrusting it to a better guardian. People try to control their lives, holding on to everything tightly. Surrender in faith is not failure or passivity. It is the wise act of realizing that your own strength and wisdom are limited, and that there is a power more loving and capable who can manage your life better. It is transferring your treasure from an unsafe bank to an absolutely secure vault. Peter tried to pilot the boat through the storm by himself. He struggled, shouted, and became exhausted. Only when he was desperate and cried out, "Lord, save us," did he surrender his control. At that moment, Jesus stood up and calmed the storm. Peace came only after Peter handed over the treasure of his control to him. 66. A pilgrim soul views everything in the world as a borrowed treasure, not a property to be owned. If you believe this world is your permanent home, you will try to accumulate and cling to everything. But if you realize you are just a pilgrim on the way to your true home, your perspective will change. Family, possessions, health, time, all are precious treasures lent to you by God for the journey. You will use them with gratitude and a light touch, ready to return them when the time comes. Jesus said to his disciples, "Foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head." He did not say this as a complaint, but as a statement of identity. His treasure was not tied to any place on earth. He lived as a pilgrim, demonstrating the freedom that comes from not clinging. 67. Treasure is not in knowing the future, but in trusting the one who holds the future. People always crave to know the future so they can control it. They turn to fortune tellers and astrologers. But anxiety about the future is a prison. Faith frees you from that prison. It doesn't give you a detailed map, but it gives you a trustworthy guide. The treasure is not knowledge of the path, but a relationship with the guide. After his resurrection, Jesus met with the disciples. Peter asked about John's fate. "Lord, what about him?" Jesus replied, "If I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? You must follow me." He gently pulled Peter away from worrying about someone else's future and focused him on his own treasure, following him in the present moment. 68. Rituals and traditions are empty vessels. They only become treasures when you fill them with love and meaning. Going to the temple, praying, fasting, keeping the law, all can become soulless actions. They are like precious but empty antique jars. They only become real treasures when performed with a sincere heart, a love for God and neighbor. Otherwise, they are just dead rituals. Jesus criticized the Pharisees for ritually washing their hands while their hearts were full of wickedness. He said, "You give 1/10 of your spices, mint, dill, and cumin, but you have neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. You blind guides, you strain out a gnat but swallow a camel." They polished the treasure of the ritual vessel, but inside it was completely empty. 69. The treasure of God's presence is not to be sought in a distant place, but to be discovered right within you. Many people think they must go to a holy mountain, a great temple, or do something extraordinary to meet God. But Jesus brought a startling revelation. The kingdom of God is within you. The most precious treasure, the very presence of the Holy Spirit, is not an external goal, but an internal reality waiting to be discovered and lived. The Samaritan woman at the well spoke to Jesus about the dispute over places of worship. "Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem." Jesus replied, "A time is coming, and has now come, when the true worshippers will worship the Father in the Spirit and in total truth. God is Spirit." He shifted the location of the treasure from a geographical place to the human heart itself. 70. Ultimately, the journey of seeking treasure is the journey of your heart becoming a treasure. In the beginning, you think you are looking for something outside yourself: wealth, peace, love, or the kingdom of heaven. But through the journey of pursuing true treasures, by practicing love, forgiveness, humility, and trust, your very nature is transformed. Your heart, from being a seeker, gradually becomes the very treasure that God delights in. The purpose of the journey is not for you to possess the treasure, but for the treasure to possess and transform you. On the last evening, Jesus washed his disciples' feet. Peter refused. It was the action of someone still thinking in worldly logic. The greater does not serve the lesser. Jesus said, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." Allowing oneself to be served, to be loved, to be transformed, that is the final step. Jesus showed that the treasure is not what we do for him, but what we allow him to do for us and in us until our own hearts reflect his beauty. 71. Your treasure determines which invisible things become visible to you. For a person whose treasure is material, realities like faith, hope, and love are vague and impractical. For a person whose treasure is the kingdom of heaven, those realities are clearer and more certain than the stones under their feet. Your heart is like a filter. It determines which rays of reality can pass through and become visible to your perception. A wealthy merchant, Felix, pointed to the Colosseum and said to Jesus, "This is real power, teacher. I can see and touch it." Jesus looked into his eyes and replied, "Felix, you can see this building, but can you see the pain of the thousands of slaves who built it? You can see gold and silver, but can you see the emptiness in the hearts of those who own it? Some of the most important realities cannot be seen with the naked eye. Your treasure determines which of your eyes are truly open." 72. To interpret the law without mercy is to count the coins in the treasury while the poor are starving outside the door. The law and religious rules were given as a protective fence, a guiding path. But when adherence to the law becomes an end in itself, it becomes a cold and dead treasure. Mercy is the spirit that makes the law come alive. Without it, your righteousness is just a form of cruelty. The scribes questioned Jesus about why he healed on the Sabbath. They quoted the law correctly. Jesus asked them, "If any of you has a sheep and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will you not take hold of it and lift it out? How much more valuable is a person than a sheep? You are so busy guarding the treasure of your rules that you no longer see the treasure of life and healing that my Father wants to give." 73. Seeing the potential in a mustard seed is more valuable than owning a dead forest. The world judges based on what is already formed, grown, and has produced results. The kingdom of heaven judges based on potential, on the seed of life. A heart whose treasure is faith will be able to see a forest in a seed, a saint in a sinner, a great future in a humble beginning. The disciples looked at a group of poor children playing and found them to be a nuisance. Jesus called them over, embraced them, and said, "Do not hinder them from coming to me, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. You see ragged children. I see future apostles, prophets, and martyrs. Your treasure lies in what the eye can see, but my Father's treasure lies in what can become." 74. A wise community sees the elderly as a treasury of memory, and the young as a treasury of hope. A community that only looks forward will lose its roots. A community that only looks to the past will grow old. True strength lies in the connection between the two generations. The elderly give the young the treasure of time-tested wisdom. The young give the elderly the treasure of energy and new dreams. In the temple court, the young apostle Philip grew impatient with the slow stories of the elders. Jesus pointed to Anna, the old prophetess, who was praying, and said, "Philip, you want to act while she is guarding the flame. Her stories are the roots that keep our faith from the storm. Your eyes see the future, while her eyes have seen God's faithfulness in the past. A community with only roots and no branches will die. A community with only branches and no roots will be toppled. Our treasure lies in weaving the two together." 75. Creating a safe space for others to stumble is a more precious treasure than building a perfect road that no one dares to walk. Many religious communities demand perfection. This creates a culture of hypocrisy and fear, where people hide their weaknesses. A community truly in the image of Jesus is a hospital for sinners. It creates a space of grace where people can stumble, confess, and be helped up without condemnation. That treasure is called a culture of grace. The Pharisees brought a woman caught in adultery. They wanted to stone her according to the law. That was the perfect road of the law. But Jesus created a space of grace. By writing on the ground and saying, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her," he turned a public trial into a moment of personal introspection. He showed that the treasure of the kingdom of heaven is not public punishment, but quiet restoration. 76. Your heart is like an inn. You cannot simultaneously host the treasure of bitterness and the treasure of peace. Bitterness and resentment take up a lot of space in the soul. They are loud, messy guests who refuse to leave. They do not allow peace, joy, and gratitude to have a place to stay. You must decide definitively which guest you want to keep. You cannot have both. Jesus told the parable of the unmerciful servant. He was forgiven a huge debt by the king, the treasure of forgiveness, but he refused to forgive a small debt owed to him by his friend. Jesus explained he received peace, but he chose to keep bitterness in his heart. The treasure of forgiveness was given to him, but he did not clear a room in his heart to contain it. So in the end, he lost both. 77. Busyness is the enemy of fruitfulness. Do not confuse motion with progress. A person can be very busy, running from one thing to another, but not actually produce any fruit of lasting value. That is the busyness of the world. The fruitfulness of the kingdom of heaven often requires slowing down, reflection, and deep cultivation. Ask yourself, are all my activities truly nurturing the treasure of my soul, or are they just exhausting me? Martha was busy preparing a meal, while Mary sat at Jesus' feet. Jesus didn't say Martha's work was bad. He only said Mary had chosen the better part. Martha was busy, while Mary was being fruitful. She was nurturing the treasure of her soul, which would continue to bear fruit long after the meal was over. 78. The Father's will is not a detailed map, but a reliable compass. Many people search for God's will, as if it were a pre-written script for every decision. This leads to paralysis and fear. In reality, God's will is often not a specific destination, but a direction toward love, justice, humility, and mercy. If your heart has this compass as its treasure, you are free to choose different paths while still heading in the right direction. A young man asked Jesus, "Should I marry this woman or that woman? What is God's will?" Jesus replied, "My Father's will is not who you marry, but what kind of husband you become, one who is loving, faithful, and sacrificial. Place your treasure in becoming that kind of person, and whoever you choose, you are doing the Father's will." 79. The greatest treasure you can leave behind is not what you have built, but the people you have built up. Roman emperors built triumphal arches and great monuments to preserve their names. But a true legacy is not in brick and stone, but in people. The time, wisdom, and love you invest to help another person grow, find their purpose, and become better. That is a living legacy, a treasure that will continue to multiply for generations. At the end of his life, the Apostle Paul did not write about the cities he had visited or the churches he had founded. He wrote to Timothy, his spiritual son, "I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. The treasure he was most proud of was not his achievements, but the fact that he had passed the torch of faith to a successor. 80. True worship is when your treasure and the Father's treasure meet. Worship is not just singing hymns or offering prayers. It is the moment you bring all that you have, your joys, sorrows, successes, failures, hopes, fears, your treasure, and lay them before God in response to his love and faithfulness, the Father's treasure. It is a dialogue of two hearts. Jesus spoke of the tax collector and the Pharisee who went to pray. The Pharisee came to report on his treasure of righteousness. He didn't truly meet God. The tax collector came, not daring to look up, only offering the treasure of his brokenness and repentance. And it was he who had a true encounter. His worship happened when his emptiness met God's fullness. Before we continue with today's journey of discovery, we would greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to leave a comment and share your feelings. If you found this content valuable, please don't forget to hit the share button to spread these positive vibes to your friends and family. And now, let's get back to the program. 81. A grateful heart can turn a meal of only bread and fish into a great feast. Treasure is not in the quantity of what you have, but in your attitude toward what you have. An ungrateful heart can sit in the midst of a lavish Roman feast and still feel lacking. A grateful heart can look at a piece of bread and see in it the wheat field, the sun, the rain, and the love of the person who made it. Gratitude is a kind of magic that turns lack into abundance. Before multiplying the loaves and fishes, Jesus had only 5 loaves and 2 fish. He did not complain about the scarcity. He looked up to heaven, gave thanks, and broke the loaves. The very act of giving thanks, recognizing this as a treasure from the Father, unlocked the miracle. 82. Your treasure will determine which voice you hear in the storm. When life becomes chaotic, many voices cry out in your head. The voice of fear, of despair, of criticism, of doubt. But there is also a quiet whisper of peace and hope. Which voice will you hear most clearly? That depends on the treasure you have grown accustomed to listening to in the quiet days. The prophet Elijah stood on the mountain. There was a great wind, an earthquake, and a fire. But the Lord was not in them. After that, there was a gentle whisper. Elijah was able to hear that voice because his treasure was intimacy with God, not spectacular displays of power. He had trained the ears of his soul. 83. Do not be afraid of the silent pauses. Sometimes, God places his treasure in silence. Modern people are afraid of silence. They fill every empty space with noise, music, information. But often, silence is not the absence of God, but an invitation. It is the space for sown seeds to germinate, for the soul to settle. The treasure of new revelation is often found after a period of sensing and waiting. Lazarus died. Jesus did not come immediately. There was a 4-day pause filled with pain and doubt for Martha and Mary. They did not understand his silence and delay. But it was in that pause that a more glorious treasure, resurrection from the dead, was being prepared. 84. You become a wise steward when you understand that even spiritual treasures are not meant to be possessed, but to be circulated. Do you receive a new understanding of Scripture? Share it. Do you experience healing? Comfort others. Are you given a talent? Use it to serve. God's grace is like a river not a pond. If you try to hoard it for yourself, it will become stagnant. Spiritual treasure only retains its value when it is given away. Jesus told his disciples, "Freely you have received, freely give." He was teaching a core principle of the kingdom. The treasure of power to heal and cast out demons that they received was not personal property to build their reputation, but working capital to invest in the lives of others. 85. A heart that has found the true treasure does not seek revenge, but reconciliation. The desire for revenge comes from a heart that feels a loss, that has had something precious taken from it: honor, property, safety. But a heart that rests in the treasure of God's love and acceptance no longer feels deficient. It doesn't need to get back anything from the person who harmed it. Instead, it is free to seek the restoration of the relationship. When the people of a Samaritan village did not welcome Jesus, James and John asked, "Lord, do you want us to call fire down from heaven to destroy them?" They felt insulted and wanted revenge, but Jesus rebuked them. His treasure was not personal honor, but the mission of salvation. He had nothing to lose, so he had no need for revenge. 86. Contentment is not abandoning aspiration, but placing aspiration in the right treasure. Many people fear that contentment will lead to complacency and laziness, but that is a misunderstanding. Being content with your material possessions frees up energy so you can aspire more intensely for the things of the kingdom: righteousness, holiness, and the presence of God. It is a holy dissatisfaction. The Apostle Paul wrote, "I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I can do all this through Him who gives me strength." His contentment did not make him inactive. On the contrary, it freed him from worldly anxieties so he could devote himself more radically to the treasure of preaching the gospel. 87. The treasure of wisdom is knowing the difference between a wall and a boundary. A wall is built from fear to separate and exclude everyone. A healthy boundary is drawn out of love and self-respect to protect what is precious inside and to define how to interact with others in a healthy way. A person with no boundaries will have their treasure trampled on. A person who only builds walls will die in solitude. Wisdom is knowing when to open the gate and when to say enough. Jesus often withdrew to lonely places to pray by himself, even when crowds were looking for him. He was drawing a boundary. He knew that in order to give, he first had to be filled. He did not let the endless needs of the crowd invade the treasure of his intimate relationship with his Father. 88. Do not confuse the wealth of knowledge with the treasure of transformation. You can read every theology book, memorize the Bible, and argue brilliantly about every doctrine. That is a wealth of knowledge. But if your life, the way you treat others, and your priorities do not change, then that treasure is only in your head, not in your heart. The transformation of character is the evidence of true treasure. Jesus said to the scribes, "You study the scriptures diligently, because you think that in them you have eternal life. These are the very scriptures that testify about me, yet you refuse to come to me to have life." They had a library of knowledge, a treasure of information, but they rejected the one who was the embodiment of life and transformation. 89. Every day, you must choose whether to crucify the treasures of the world or to enthrone the Son of Man in your heart. The death of the old self is not a one-time event. Every day, you face a choice: to feed the desires of your old nature, greed, selfishness, pride, or to nurture the presence of Christ in you, love, service, humility. There is no neutral state. Either one treasure grows, or the other. Jesus said, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me." Daily is the key word. The cross is not just a symbol of redemption, but a daily tool for crucifying false treasures, making room for the true treasure, which is the life of Christ in us. 90. Your spiritual legacy is not a copy, but a unique melody in God's symphony. Many people try to copy the exact life of a saint or a predecessor, but God does not create copies. He gives each person a unique set of talents, life experiences, and a specific calling. Your legacy is when you use those unique treasures to play the melody that only you can play, contributing to the richness of the symphony of the kingdom of heaven. Jesus called very different disciples: impulsive Peter, contemplative John, calculating Matthew, zealous Simon. He did not try to make them all the same. He sanctified and used their very personalities. The treasure that each brought to the kingdom was their unique, transformed self. 91. A good death is not a painless death, but a death with a treasure that has been sent on ahead. The world fears death and tries to prolong life at all costs. But a life lived for eternal treasures will see death differently. It is not an end, but a homecoming. A good death is when you can breathe your last in peace, knowing that the most precious parts of you, love, healed relationships, acts of service, have been sent on and are waiting for you ahead. When the good thief was crucified next to Jesus, he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." In his final moments, he made a great transfer of treasure. He abandoned all earthly hope and placed his entire future in the mercy of the Lord. And Jesus confirmed, "Today you will be with me in paradise." He had a good death. 92. The longing to be united with God is the final treasure that the Holy Spirit sows in your heart. After all the searching, after all the striving, there comes a time when you realize that no treasure, however spiritual, can satisfy you. Only the giver of the treasure can do that. A deep longing, a celestial homesickness, a yearning to be completely united with God. This is the sign that your heart is very close to home. In the book of Revelation, the final cry of the church is not "give us strength" or "give us peace," but a loving invitation. "Come, Lord Jesus." Maranatha. It is the cry of a bride awaiting her groom, of a soul that has realized that the ultimate and only treasure is the full presence of the one she loves. 93. You do not seek treasure to fill your emptiness. You are filled to become a treasure for others. This is the final reversal of worldly logic. Initially, you come to God because you are in need. You need healing. You need peace. But God's purpose does not stop at filling you. His purpose is to fill you to the point that His grace and love overflow from you, turning you into a source of life, a treasure, a refuge for others who are weary and empty. Jesus said to the Samaritan woman, "Whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life." He didn't just give her a cup of water to drink. He turned her into a well. The treasure is not just received, it turns the receiver into a giver. 94. I do not just tell you to find the treasure. I am the treasure, and I am looking for you. After all 93 philosophies, the most overwhelming and all-encompassing truth is this: The gospel is not the story of humanity's journey to find God, but the story of God in the person of Jesus Christ, who left his throne to find humanity. You are not a lone treasure hunter. You are the lost treasure that the Good Shepherd left the 99 sheep to find. Your heart can only find its final rest when it realizes it has been found. Jesus told 3 consecutive parables: the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the prodigal son. All 3 share a common theme. It was not the sheep that found its way back, not the coin that rolled itself into the light, not the son who granted himself forgiveness. The common thread is a tireless seeker. The shepherd searches, the woman lights a lamp and sweeps the house, and the father runs out to meet his son. Jesus concludes his entire teaching with this image. God's greatest treasure is you, and he will do everything to bring you back home. Dear friends, and so our journey, a long journey through 94 philosophies, inspired by a single teaching of Jesus Christ, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also, has come to its final stage. We began with a seemingly simple question: what is the treasure we are pursuing? Then, through each step, we gradually realized that this teaching is not just a choice between the material and the spiritual, but a compass that directs all our thoughts, emotions, and actions. It determines the lens through which we see life, how we face suffering, how we build relationships, and the legacy we leave behind. And perhaps the greatest revelation at the end of this journey is not that we have found the treasure, but that we have realized we are the treasure that has been found. The gospel is not the story of a lonely person searching for God, but the story of a God in the form of the Good Shepherd who went to great lengths to find each lost sheep, which is every one of us. The journey to find treasure, in the end, is the journey for our hearts to realize their priceless value in the eyes of the Creator and to be transformed, becoming a treasure of love and grace for the world. So today, in this very moment, where will you place your heart? Sacred Church Audio sincerely thanks you for your patience in listening, reflecting, and accompanying us throughout this long and profound series. Your presence is a precious source of motivation for us, and to keep this flame of contemplation spreading, we earnestly invite you. Leave a comment below. Which of the 94 philosophies touched you most deeply? And what treasure are you choosing to cultivate for your soul? Sacred Church Audio will read every one of your comments. Like and share this video. If you found this series valuable, please give it a like and spread it to those you love, to other souls who are also on a journey of seeking meaning. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. If this is your first time with Sacred Church Audio, or if you haven't yet subscribed, please do so today, so we don't lose touch and can continue on other meaningful journeys of reflection in the future. Once again, thank you for listening. From the Sacred Church Audio YouTube channel, may each of our hearts always be anchored in the treasure of eternal peace and love. Farewell, and see you in the next programs. 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 In the next